friends. Today I will be making the final piece in my fall collection. I know it's like the end of October. I should have had this done already, but you know, I work a day job, okay? So, anyways, I'm going to be making another one of the shirts that has the tie at the front of the neckline. It has the like 3/4 elastic sleeves. But one of those. It's going to be made of this. I find that the larger sizes sell better, so I will be making an extra large. Assuming I have enough of it. I do still have to lay it out and make sure, but I'm pretty sure I do. So this is a rather lightweight, slippery fabric. So as I'm going through making this, I will be discussing my techniques and tips and experiences sewing with satiny, slippery fabrics. When it comes to laying out the fabric, if you are so lucky as to have one of those like vacuum suction tables, oh my goodness, use it. I don't have one of those. I have seen people put tissue paper between the layers of fabric. I don't find this particularly effective, but if it works for you, you do you. If you're working on a table and you're using a cutter, you can clamp or tape the edges of the fabric down. I'm working on the carpet. I find that for home sewing anyway, since I'm at home, I can do whatever I want. I find that the carpet does actually help a little bit with gripping the material because obviously it's much more friction than, say, a table. Use the absolute thinnest pins and needles that you can get your hands on. If you use pins at all. You'll maybe want to do in fact, I'm going to do that right now. Do a test to make sure that your pins don't put runs in your fabric. But this appears to be fine. So I'm going to go with it. I think these are called satin pins, which makes perfect sense because they're very thin and I'm putting it on satin fabric. I'm using them on satin fabric. I need 2 yolks. But my yoke is on the fold, so of course I'm going to have to cut it out twice. Blah, 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 blah. If you want to work with slippery satiny fabrics a lot, and your pins are like many, many years old, just get new ones. We don't want any burrs or whatever. That pin is dull. Don't use that one. This is going to work. I don't have that random rectangle there that I could do something else with. Maybe whoever buys this shirt is going to get a matching scrunchie. On something like this that's animal print, it's probably not quite as noticeable if the grain is slightly off, but if you're working with something that is super noticeable, like maybe stripes, especially if it's like a big stripe, then you might even want to pin the layers of fabric together before you pin the pattern pieces on. You'll want to test your scissors first to make sure they're really sharp. Because if they're not, then any little like nicks or burrs on the blade can pull the threads. And that looks really bad. So make sure that your scissors are sharp. Maybe do a little test in the corner first. These appear to be sharp enough, so I'm going to get cutting. If they're not, then you'll want to use a whetstone and sharpen them. If you can sharpen your scissors. So like the very metal-y ones like this definitely can be, but if you have something that's like coated in plastic or whatever, you might not be able to sharpen them. But you know what? You should probably try, because if your scissors are dull, then what's the worst thing that can happen? You still have to buy a new pair? one last thing I need is a bias. A bias strip to go around the neck edge. So I've got the selvage edge lined up with one of the lines on the cutting mat, and I'm gonna line up the ruler so that the selvage edge is going diagonally through these square inch marks. The next thing that I'm going to do is thread up my machines in this like golden tan color that I'm using to sew. But before sew, I want to change my needles and test the machine to make sure that not only the needle isn't leaving little nick marks, but also to make sure that the feed dogs are not harming the fabric, because they could actually do that. I pressed the tag, the care label, and I am going to, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to fold this in half here. And make a little teeny tiny notch in the center so I know exactly where the center is. That'll make it a little bit easier for me to center the tag, because I like that. So leopard or cheetah print or whatever this is, what is the difference between leopard and cheetah print? Yeah, this is definitely leopard print. Okay, so anyways, that doesn't really have like a distinct up or down or whatever, but if you are working with something that does, and you brain fired and cut one of them upside down, obviously put that on the inside. No one's going to see that if you're sewing for yourself, unless someone else does your laundry. Yeah, so as you know, I make very small batches, often just a single garment, because I buy my fabrics at the thrift store. So it's hit or miss how much I get. Like, it doesn't really make sense for me to hire a bunch of tags made online when I'm just making one shirt. But legally, to sell them, I have to have a fiber content and care label. So I must include a tag. Plus, I mean, why would I not want to put my brand name in there? Right? My name, made in USA, how to wash it, and fiber content. There you go. But yeah, so I have like sheets of fabric that can go in my home printer, and I print my own labels. It's great. I have these teeny tiny notches here, and I am going to make this pleat in the back. Match up the two notches, put it down, put the needle down. It takes a little bit more effort to get things to stay nicely when you're working with something so slippery, but it's worth the effort. And how far am I going to go down? Probably an inch or so. It doesn't need to be a huge pleat. You will note that this box pleat is on the outside. This is a purely stylistic matter, whether you want to see this on the outside or this on the outside. It's entirely a personal choice. I'm gonna go press this and be right back. So the whole yoke and shoulder assembly is quite interesting. So I have the two layers here, and the first thing that I'm gonna do is sew the neck edge together. tapping and pressing this seam will also help make it sit down nicely. What I'm doing right now is I'm pinning the outer facing yoke to the back of the bodice. That's what. And then I'm gonna wad this whole thing up. And I'm gonna pin the inside yoke to the back as well, with the whole back bodice rolled up inside of there, as you can see here. Pins are great, seriously. However, when working with something really satiny and slippery, the less pins you stick into that fabric, the less chances you have for runs and other unfortunate incidents. So I honestly would not use more than absolutely necessary. As much as it seems counterintuitive, given that it's so slippery and wants to slip around on you. Also, if you haven't got it quite lined up, you can move it, which I'm about to do, I think. I think I've not got that center quite centered. I think I'm going to pin in from the outside, that's why. Alright, I think I've got it lined up now. And I'm going to sew through it. Check periodically to make sure that you still have all 3 layers there. Fun fact, since this seam is entirely encased, there's really no need to serge it unless you're working with something that's really exceptionally prone to fraying. Do a one last inspection to make sure that you've got all of the layers there, and then the big reveal. The back of the shirt is complete. You could, if you were working with something less busy, you could do like a top stitch or whatever there if you wanted a little bit more look, but it's not necessary. I'm going to press this nice and flat, and then we will work on the front. Here on the front tie, I have a little notch here. This is where I'm going to start sewing, because this part here has to stay open and get clipped and whatnot so that it can get tucked into the front of the shirt. Thus, this part is sewn in and this part is the tie. Blah, 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 blah. next thing I'm doing is attaching the ties to the front of the shirt at the neck edge. This area right here, I clip this just a little bit, and this is open, whereas this is open, whereas this is sewn shut, and that's so that I can sew this far. Am I just like giving away all my trade secrets? Maybe. Molly, her coat print, I guess, is called Mackerel Tabby. I have never seen Mackerel Tabby print anything, but I've seen lots of leopard print stuff. Cheetah print, tiger print. Why only big cats? I want a Mackerel Tabby printed something. Orange tabbies are nice too. Flame Point Siamese are nice. Calicos are cute. So are black cats. And tuxedos. Torties are nice too. You know what? I don't think I've ever seen an ugly cat. Although those hairless cats, they're a different kind of cute. Let's call it that. Quick inspection, make sure you've got all the layers. Look at this little North American blob cat. Yeah, I'm talking about you, Molly. Oh, big stretch. Yeah. Are you a North American blob cat? Yeah. You're a North American blob cat, aren't you? What I'm doing now is sewing the bias strip that I cut around the neck edge. I find it a little bit easier to have the bias strip on the bottom because the bias strip is just a little bit more stretchy because it's on the bias. That's what bias do. So I just got all the edges there lined up. Be careful, the iron's hot. I'm top stitching the bias strip that has been sewn on to the neck edge. I'm top stitching it so that I can make sure that I get nice even stitching all along the front, because the neck edge is a highly noticeable area of a shirt and I want it to look good, obviously. So the straighter, neater, tidier my stitching can be, the better. And the best way to do this is from the front. I can snip off the extra little bits of... It is imperative that the neck edge of the shoulder seams lines up perfectly because we're done sewing this. There is no more happening to the neck edge. So we want that to be absolutely lined up as perfect as possible. So I'm going to put a pin in there and I'm put some more pins in here just to make sure that it stays nice. And I'm going to start there. And in order to make sure that it stays nice, I'm gonna slowly walk right over the pin, which, okay, I'm gonna put some back tack in there too, but slowly walking over the pin because I don't want the fabric to shift on me, especially since at the neck edge both sides are slippery because it's 4 layers currently in that area. All right, So past that, now I'm going to hold these edges together and finish the seam. Now I'm going to serge the shoulder seams that I just sewed. I am also going to top stitch the shoulder seams because, well, mostly because I don't want this little nub of seam allowance sticking out, so I'm just gonna sew it down to make sure that it doesn't. The next step is, of course, to put a gathering stitch in the sleeve cap. Once again, with like the, the thinnest pins you can find, I'm pinning the sleeve into the armscye, making sure that the stitching lines match up best as I can. I know that I mentioned previously using the absolute thinnest needle you can find to sew this, and that is still true. Absolutely. I thought I should also mention that some people use ballpoint needles to do this. I would not. I have not had good success with ballpoint needles. I just do not use them. I think that rather than like poking right through, they sort of catch on the material, on the threads, and like pull on the threads, and I just don't want that. So I pretty much never use ballpoints, but you know what? You should do what works best for you. When you put in sleeves, also make note of which side is the back and which side is the front. Most sleeves have a distinction between the back and the front. Not all of them do, but most do. And I'm gonna, back to the smaller stitch because we're not basting this. I mean, you could if you weren't quite sure if you got it in the right spot, you could baste it and take it out. I don't, generally. Be mindful also that we want the gathers on the sleeve and not on the bodice. Of course, do a quick inspection to make sure that you have everything captured that you want captured and nothing that you don't. Then take it over to the serger. Now that I have the sleeves set in, I'm going to serge seam, as well as serge the underarm seam, the side of the body and the under the arm. All right. All that's left is to do the cuffs and the hem. When I do hems narrow enough to do so, I like to line the fold of the hem along one of the seam guide lines on the machine. And that way, the fold of the hem and the stitching line are always the same distance apart, even if my hem on the inside is less than perfect. So as you can see here, I have the fold of the hem lined up with the 10 millimeter line, which is approximately 3/8 of an inch. I pinned up the hem an entire inch, and I'm folding this edge basically into the fold. And that means that when my needle goes down, my stitching line is 3/8 of an inch from the fold of the hem, regardless of where this folded edge lies. As long as I catch it underneath, it's all good. The width of the sleeve is about 14 inches around at the wrist. So, okay, there are 2 layers here. That's why it looks like 7, because I already have my sleeve sewn shut. But anyways, I think I'm gonna make the elastic about 9 inches long, because I don't want it to be too tight. You know what I mean? And I'm gonna zigzag over it to hold the 2 ends together. Is this secure? Alright, so what I'm gonna do here, I usually like to start around the seam, and I'm going to use the elastic as a guide to how big to make the cuff. The casing for the elastic, how big to make the casing for the elastic. And of course I must be careful not to sew through the elastic, but just close to it. And so, sometimes I just find this easier than like pinning it up, pressing it, fishing the elastic through, etc. This is just easier, especially when it's so narrow. I will be the first to admit, I am not a big fan of mixing prints. Like, I would mix some prints, I would not mix these prints. But when I looked in my closet for things that are for sale and the appropriate size for this mannequin, this is the only bottom I came up with. And I just thought it would be improper to have her on camera with no bottoms. But that's okay, because we're here to look at this blouse. Look at it. Look at the blouse. Look at it. We have the front ties, and we have the elastic cuffed sleeves. Gathers in the shoulders. As you can see, this is a very shiny fabric. The pleat in the back for ease of movement.